Donald Trump's position on the national debt is identical to Joe Biden's.
There have been promises made about draining the swamp, building the wall, doing all these things. None of that came to fruition.
He's a petulant child when someone disagrees with him.
He's also a fundamentally flawed person who engages in reckless conduct.
I don't need to read the indictment or believe its allegations are true, although I'm pretty confident they are.
Clearly, it was unauthorized, illegal, and dangerous.
I view them serious and disqualifying, actually, for commander-in-chief.
Anybody who doesn't want to look at the facts, they should be disqualified from running, not just Trump.
For months, Donald Trump enjoyed front-runner status in the 2024 Republican presidential race without a lot of pushback from prominent members of the GOP. That has changed, as you can see, following his federal indictment for refusing to turn over classified documents. I think a lot of people were shocked to see what was in that indictment. Meanwhile, two former critics and opponents of Trump continue to defend his handling of our nation's secrets.
So they're fine. Let's just be very clear.
Yeah.
They're fine with Donald Trump stealing nuclear secrets, stealing secrets on our plans to attack Iran, stealing secrets on weaknesses, pertaining to the weaknesses of the United States government. And they're fine with him holding it in unsecured locations, which begs the question, should they have any security access to any classified documents?
We'll debunk their misinformation. Jonathan Lemire, Reverend Al Sharpton, still with us. Joining the conversation, we have New York Times opinion columnist David French. It's good to have you on this Monday morning, David.
So, David, we were looking at these clips. We've been looking at them all morning. And, Mika, while looking at the latest batch, we've been talking about it all morning and showing them. She said, this just feels different. I'm curious if that's a conclusion you're reaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that for the first time in a really long time, you have a number of prominent Republicans, including not just sort of the more traditional Trump critics, who are unleashing on Trump. But here's the thing, Joe. You look at where they're unleashing, and I'm not casting any aspersions on doing it. They need to do it. It's mainstream media outlet after mainstream media outlet. Well, here's what I'm looking for. What's going to be the coverage on Fox? What's going to be the coverage on Newsmax? When you listen to talk radio, those are the folks who have their fingers on the pulse of the Republican primary public, or the primary voters in the Republican Party. And right now, you're seeing some signs of light, maybe sometimes on Fox, but much of the rest of the right-wing media is still lockstep. They're still all in with this guy, and that's why you see the Ted Cruzes of the world and some of these other Republicans. And you know what? Here's what's even worse, Joe. They're not fine with it. That's not the way they handle classified documents. They're just so afraid for their political future, or so afraid of Donald Trump, they're acting like they're fine with it. We've been through all this before for years, where people say one thing in public or do one thing with their own lives and then defend Donald Trump, or say one thing in private and defend Donald Trump.
Right.
Yeah, in this case, though, David, in this case, Lindsey Graham, to say Lindsey Graham knows better, it's an understatement. He's been on the Armed Services Committee either in the United States House or in the Senate, most likely every day since like 1995 when he came to Washington, D.C. I mean, he certainly understands better than anybody what's at stake when somebody steals nuclear secrets. How that's different than what Joe Biden did, how that's different than what Mike Pence did, lying about it, lying to your lawyers, lying to the FBI, lying about, again, the most sensitive secrets that the United States has. He knows better.
Of course he does. I mean, he's an Air Force officer. I mean, this is a guy who's handled classified documents for years and years and years and knows how to do it. That is what is so absurd. And as somebody who lives in the heart of Red America, I know that the critiques that you're seeing on some of these shows are not penetrating through to the Trump voting public. They're still completely ensconced in their bubble. And again, I have seen some more promising things emerge on Fox, where they're allowing some Trump critical voices to make the case. But when you look at that larger sort of infotainment wing, it's all double standards this and Hillary this and Joe Biden this and Pence this. rarely do you ever see anything break through on the actual facts of what Trump is alleged to have done, including the picture evidence, including the lies. Rarely does it break through, and until that breaks through, that primary gap between Trump and DeSantis or any other competitor is staying wide.
So this would be a fascinating question to ask you. So I talk a good bit about my friends, family members in the state of Florida, a swing state, still a swing state, not as much as it used to be, but a swing state. Charlie Sykes in Wisconsin saying the same thing, that from his friends, his family members in Wisconsin, he's starting to see exhaustion set in. You are in deep red Tennessee, where I've got to say some of your elected officials say some of the most egregious things about this. I'm curious, though, are you finding in your church, are you finding in your community, are you finding among friends the change that Charlie and I are finding among people who voted for Donald Trump twice?
Not really. I'm seeing that the exhausted people are more exhausted. In other words, that the people who are already a little bit out on Trump are more out on Trump. But amongst the hardcore, and, you know, Joe, we're not seeing really any substantial change in the polls. I'm not even sensing really any substantial change in the temperature and sort of the vibes, if you will, that you think about that sometimes
David,
precede.
Explain this to me, though. I mean, they again, back when I was a Republican, it wasn't enough to win. We had to win big. It wasn't. I mean, we had to win every 2 years. It was an obsession. There was no substitute for victory. I mean, I said that was over my campaign headquarters in my first campaign. But that was the mantra of the Republican Party. I'm just curious. How can these people have sat through one loss after another since 2017 and see this information like nuclear secrets?
They don't want to say they were wrong about Trump?
It's not like a right now a question of are you going to support Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Donald Trump or AOC. It's Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis.
Right.
Donald Trump or Tim Scott. Donald Trump or Nikki Haley. Donald Trump or Mike Pence. And they're still picking the guy that's stealing nuclear secrets that's lost every year since 2017?
I mean, look, we're dealing with some deep pride and identity issues here, Joe. I mean, we just have to put that on the table, because if you leave Trump, then is that an admission that you were wrong? Is that an admission that maybe he's done wrong things? Are you giving aid and comfort to people on the other side of the aisle or to never Trumpers whom you really despise or dislike? There's so much pride wrapped into this. There's so much identity wrapped into this. This is a conversation where sort of the policy matters or electoral politics or electoral realities are downstream from pride, identity, and this real feeling. You'll see it. You'll see it when you talk to people, with this real feeling that if I give up on Trump, that means they win. And the one thing that I cannot do is help them to win. And so we're talking at a level of identity that is very deep and profound, and I'm not quite sure how you crack through that, and, you know, we'll see if it ever happens.
Well, you know, and I'm not saying this to be glib. I'm talking about my people. I'm talking about my tribe. I'm talking about my region. I love the South. I mean, it's my home, just like it's your home. But are we moving into lost cause territory with a third of the country? Are we moving into lost cause territory where, again, because the idea in politics is to win elections. These people have to know Donald Trump will not win in 2024.
But these people believe Biden runs a crime family and that his son has got access to just as many secrets as Trump did. I mean, they believe many conspiracy theories. So lost cause may be a good word. I know it's a harsh assessment, but that may be where we are because of the disinformation.
But yeah, maybe so. But my question is, would they rather, and I'm not being snarky or glib here, but would they rather be victims? Would they rather be snowflakes? Would they rather be aggrieved and cling on to that aggrievement instead of winning? Is being a victim more important than being a victor?
Well, that's absolutely not the way they'd frame it in their minds. They would say what's most important is to be right, and if you go down with the ship being right, then you just go down with the ship, and that's the way they're going to look at it.
But again, DeSantis is DeSantis wrong for them? He's playing all the aggrieved, weak, pathetic, snowflake triggered courts, right? And he doesn't have 2 indictments. So maybe, and he actually won an election in 2022.
Not liable for sexual abuse and defamation.
Right. I mean, but he's also running the Ted Cruz playbook, which is primarily, I'm running against Trump from Trump's right, which misunderstands Trump's appeal. It wasn't that Trump won the 2016 primary because he was running to everyone's right. I mean, in many ways, he ran to folks left on some positions, especially economically. So he's running a Ted Cruz playbook, which is Trump's just not conservative enough. I'm the one who I'm on the right with the results. And so far it's not working, just like it didn't work in 2016.